Good morning. This is Steve Waterhouse. Welcome to How to Identify Top Salespeople Before You Hire Them. And the truth is, we're actually going to show you today how to identify top salespeople before you even interview them. I can tell you that as a lifelong sales trainer and sales development person, when I finally figured out the secret to this, it was an eye-opening experience to finally recognize that rather than just training people to make them better, there was actually a scientific way to select them, to identify those people who were going to perform the way we wanted them to perform when we got them into the job. And every hiring manager knows instinctively that there is a way to choose the right person. And yet, over and over again, we make mistakes. We don't find the right people. And today what we're going to do is show you a scientifically validated approach that will give you some tools, a unique way to be able to make sure that the salespeople you're putting on your team are the right people for your organization. And I mean your organization, not a generic, but right for you. When we look at Predictive Index, the tool we're going to talk about, we're talking about an organization that's been around over 50 years. We have 6,000 clients around the world. We've trained 35,000 of our executives and managers to use these tools in 120 countries and 60 languages. The key to success in sales, as you all know, is a combination of three things: behavior, knowledge, and experience. A person has to know what they need to know to be a good salesperson. And you can read books and you can study and you can go to classes for that. A person has to have some experience. They have to have been out there in the field. They have to have tried some things. Sometimes we hire green people and we give them that experience. But until they have that experience, they don't reach true success. But finally, it's their behavior. It's what they do in the field. It's what they do in your store. It's what they do on the telephone that makes the difference. Behavior is the ultimate key to any performance, because we all know brilliant people in our lives who've accomplished nothing. They have the knowledge piece. Some of them even have the experience piece. They've even worked in organizations. And yet they've never excelled because they didn't do the things that successful people do. And that's the key. Can we find those people early in the process? We know that improving skills makes a difference in sales. We know that. We know from training. But we know from training that we can't improve everybody's skills. We know that we try to train some people just get it and some don't. We know that we need effective leaders. And that the more effective our managers are, the more effective our salespeople are going to be. But at the core, at the base, is accurate selection. Did we find the right person to put on the team? A great manager and a great trainer can't do as much with the wrong people. In some cases, they can't do anything with the wrong people. And so our goal today is to look at that piece. How do we make sure that the people we're bringing in fit our organization and will perform at the highest level? Well, the first key is to understand what you need. Now, every organization needs something slightly different in a salesperson, and I have executives call me all the time and say, Steve, what is the ideal salesperson? I can't answer that because it depends on your organization. Are you looking for a hunter or a farmer? In other words, are you looking for someone who's going to go out and knock on doors and find new stuff, new opportunities, new clients? Or are you looking for someone who can work with your existing base of customers and build a relationship and referrals and hold on to that base? Those are very different kinds of people. And the truth is, you'll seldom find both behavior styles in one person. We look for lead availability. If there are lots of leads available, it's an easier job to fill. We don't need as strong a hunter if we have lots of leads. And of course, the quality of the leads matters too. Making sure that these are leads that are worthwhile, that are actually closable leads. But we have to look at the environment we're putting someone in before we decide what kind of person we're going to have. For instance, a retail store, for the most part, doesn't ask the salesperson to develop leads. For the most part, they do the lead generation through their advertising. Now, that's not always true. We have several clients who have very well-known retail stores where a select number of people within their organization actually do get on the phone, call people who've stopped in before, and invite them back. Where they actually have, I have one store that's a clothing store that does special wardrobing events, and gets on the phone and invites people in. That all builds into what is required for the top salesperson. We want to look at the sophistication of the sale. What are we selling here? Are we selling lawn service, or are we selling rocket science? And I can tell you that I have some friends that sell lawn service that is pretty close to rocket science with the kind of attention they put on it and the kind of chemicals and different things they use, the expertise that they have. So what is the sophistication of the sale? How complex a relationship do we have to have here? I've worked with organizations that sold to doctors. I've actually been in the operating room with salespeople when they're making the sale live with the patient on the operating table. That's a pretty sophisticated sale. So that tells you something about the intelligence, about the background of the person that you're going to need. When we're looking at you might even get in this in the, well, for instance, the music sales business. We have a client that we're talking with which has a really top-end music business. The sophistication of the sale ranges all over the place. You get people coming in who've never played an instrument but would like to, and that takes one level of salesperson. And then you get the person coming in that is a professional musician and needs to talk to somebody at that level. So what is the sophistication of the sale so that we can identify the kind of person that's going to fit? What is the competition? The competition matters to a huge degree in some markets. For instance, years back in 2004, 2005, anyone who wanted to get into the real estate business could make money. There was loads of competition, but there was lots of business. And so it didn't feel like there was as much competition. There was enough business to go around. Today, to get in that business is much more competitive. And therefore, you need a person who is much more of a hunter to make that happen. We need to understand how much distance there is from the support. In other words, if we're putting someone in a home office location where they have support right there to help them, then we don't need as experienced and sophisticated a salesperson in some cases. We can work with that person. But if we're going to put that person out in Dubuque and our home office is in Miami and we have no regional support in Dubuque, then we better have someone who can step up to that level and manage at that distance. The length of the sales cycle is important. When we start looking at the behavioral styles of candidates, some have the patience for a longer sales cycle and some don't. We need to make sure that the kind of person we're bringing in fits the sales cycle that we have. And finally, the time until results. In other words, sometimes we put people into sales situations where the first day they're going to make a sale. Sometimes we put people into sales situations where it may take months to make your first sale. And we need to make sure we're putting someone in who has the behavioral style to fit all of these. Otherwise, you're doomed to less than success or failure in many cases. When we look at the sales cycle itself, and this is taken from our own customer-focused selling sales training program, we look at kind of 5 stages. From opening, which is the getting them, building trust, getting in the door the first time, investigating, asking those great questions, presenting, are you able to articulate the value proposition, confirming the closing part of the sale, and positioning, building for long-term relationships. You need to know in your organization where do you need your strengths? Do you need someone to be able to open, to get into the door for the first time and make that happen? Or are you pretty much in the door and you need someone to ask the questions and dig deeper to make the to identify the value proposition? Are you looking for people to make sophisticated presentations so that they can take that value proposition that they've identified in the investigative stage and present that effectively? Is closing a big deal for you? Do we need people that can confirm and close? And again, are long-term relationships something that's important? We're having a roof done, and the roofers come about once every 20 years. So long-term relationships, not very important. You seldom remember the one that did it last time. On the other hand, many businesses rely on those long-term relationships with the clients. When you're looking at a candidate, there are a lot of things you look at. You look at their intelligence and their education and their knowledge and skills and experience and interests and attitudes and literacy and language and physical health. All of those pieces can be identified relatively easily from the resume and the interview. As a matter of fact, most of them can be identified relatively easily from the resume and a phone call. It's not difficult to pick those pieces up. However, when we get down to motivating needs and drive, what drives someone to do what they need to do? Are they motivated to do the things that will make them successful in your organization? That's a whole different game, and that's what we're going to focus on this morning. We break drive down into 4 different categories. We look at dominance, extroversion, patience, and formality. In other words, we first look at what is the person's drive to exert their own influence on people and events. In other words, do they have the drive to pick up the phone and interrupt someone's day, to get an appointment, to make something happen themselves, or are they waiting for someone else to do it? What is their drive for social interaction? Is this a person that's going to get connected with a client and stay connected with them long term, or is this a person that's much more focused on the technical side of things and doesn't build a long-term warm relationship? We look at patience. Does this person have the patience to deal with a detailed kind of sale, or are we looking for someone where we don't want patience, where we want drive, where we want a person who's out there trying to make the next thing happen and do it in a hurry? And formality, following the rules and structure. In many organizations, for instance, the pharmaceutical companies have so much regulation around them today that you need a salesperson that can follow the rules, that can do things the way they're supposed to be done. However, the more formality we have in a salesperson, the more structured they are, the less fluid they are, and for the most part, the less of a hunter they make. The high formality people, the ones that follow the rules a lot, tend to overthink a sales situation and therefore not move forward as quickly as they might. So we're able to look at an individual. We're actually able to look at your organization and determine where on each of these 4 scales you need to have that factor in order to be hiring the right person. Once you have that ideal pattern, once you have that ideal level on each of these 4 levels, it becomes relatively easy to look at people. And matter of fact, you can look at people with the predictive index behavioral assessment and know immediately that you've got someone who has the basic behavioral drives to be successful in your organization. So how do we know all this works? Well, quite simply, we've done 50 years of studies. What you're looking at now and what I'm going to show you several examples of are studies where we've gone into an organization. Now, in this particular case, we went into this organization and we looked at 32 outside sales reps. And those outside sales reps were analyzed for their average monthly sales. The idea being, let's figure out what their sales are, and let's see if we can identify what behavioral style was right for maximizing that. Now look at this. On the left, you have the bottom 10%. On the right, you have the top 10 performers. So essentially what we're looking at here is the bottom third and the top third. And look at the difference. It's more than a 5x increase in sales between the bottom performers and the top performers. Now, these people were all managed, hired, and paid the same. The difference is their behavioral style. Their behavioral style differs, and that made all the difference. We know, for instance, that the top performers here are more driven, they have less patience, and we know they are more independent. They have more dominance than does the bottom group. We know in this particular company that those two pieces make an enormous difference. And so for this company, when they are scanning through candidates, the first thing they do is give everyone an assessment. They're looking for this pattern over here. They want to find that pattern on the left, and when they find it, they very quickly bring that person in, because these people are true hunters and will, if they don't bring them in a hurry, that person's going to be looking for a job someplace else. They may find it. By the time you call them back, they'll be gone. So what we're looking at here is a tool, a scientific way of identifying the person that can literally sell more than 5 times as much as the bottom candidates. That's an enormous difference. Now, this particular case, this one happens to be outside sales reps in the manufacturing equipment and distribution industry. So different industries, different companies will have different profiles. When we're looking, here's another one. In this case, we're looking at 67 inside sales reps. This happens to be in the information services business. And again, we're looking at the bottom group and the top group. In this case, we're looking at the bottom quartile and the top quartile, and look at the difference. What we were asked to measure here was the average percent to sales goal. And the bottom group missed their goal by 30%. They only hit 71% of their goal. The top group blew it out of the water, 181% of goal. So that tells you, if you are in this industry, if you are in this business, and you want to grow your sales, stop bringing in these people and start bringing in these people. Now, it sounds pretty simple. It says, you know, don't we have to account for anything else? Sure. But go back to that slide I had a few minutes ago where I showed all the other things, intelligence and experience. Those things matter. But if all of those things are relatively equal, look at the difference that it makes when you have someone who's driven to do the things they're supposed to do. The top salesperson in this particular kind of organization is a good relationship builder. That's what we see by this factor. And the bottom factor person is not. And quite honestly, that makes an enormous amount of difference. The other thing we know is this person is driven to do things faster. And all of that is driving to this enormous difference in sales. So when you're looking at trying to identify a person, trying to figure out what is right. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this bottom pattern over here never works. As a matter of fact, I can tell you many sales situations in which this person is exactly the right person, but not as an inside sales rep in this company. As an inside sales rep in this company, they are a mismatch for that position. If I look at the next one here, this is a study of 255 sales managers. Now, this is managers. And in this particular case, we're looking at retail. So these are managers who are managing retail facilities, and we're looking at how they perform. In this particular case, we were asked to analyze the average yearly sales growth. And what the company did, again, is they gave us all 255 salespeople's sales for 2 years. And they also gave us the behavioral style, or we went in and got the behavioral style analysis of all of those people. We then send this up to our PhDs in Boston. They then grind out this data. So this data is based on a regression analysis and other mathematical analysis of the performance criteria for these particular people as compared with their behavioral style. So again, what we've seen is we go from missing sales, from decreasing sales by 15.7% to increasing sales by 20%. That's enormous. We go from a negative $122,000 in sales growth to a positive $193,000 in sales growth. Essentially, again, that's telling us, do not bring in these people. Get me more of these, whatever you do. And if we do that, we instantly see this kind of growth. So our bottom quartile of salespeople starts to have an increase that could be as much as, well, look at this number here. I mean, it's just enormous in the increase, almost double their sales. So what does that mean? It means in this particular organization, being a little bit more assertive matters. It means in this organization being a little bit more technical matters. And we can tell this by looking at these particular patterns. So we can analyze this and say, let's get more of these, fewer of the ones on the right, and the result is going to be a dramatic improvement in your sales. Again, what we're doing here is using science to identify the behavioral styles that are going to work. Every sales manager is looking for the same thing. When you're interviewing someone, you're trying to find that person who is going to behave the way you want them to behave. You're doing that through questioning. You're doing that through your experience. You're doing that through your gut instincts. What we're saying is let's add a layer of science to that and make this happen. By the way, in order to use this as a pre-hire tool, the EEOC requires us to be able to prove that we can predict performance. If we could not do that, the federal government would not allow us to use this tool as a pre-hire tool. So it's not just our opinion here. We're actually operating under federal guidelines given to us by the EEOC. Here's another interesting one. This is 124 outbound telesales agents in the financial services business. And in this particular case, this is an interesting one because look at this. In all of the cases I've given you so far, we were looking for someone who was more dominant to make the sale. In this particular case, we're looking for someone who's less dominant but better at building relationships. And that's what works for this. So in this particular case, the way this company sells, when you put somebody who's less pushy but better at building relationships, sales grow dramatically. Look at this, from an average of 504 to an average of 82,000. That's enormous. And this is taking the, imagine out of this 124 sales reps, if we replaced these bottom 30 with another 30 that looked like this. So for every one of these 804s, we're going to replace it with an 82,000. So 82,000 times 30 would be the average increased sales this organization could expect to realize simply by replacing these folks with these folks. that's an enormous change. And I have to tell you, as someone who spent his life in the sales training business, believing that we could go in and train these below average people and train them to be top salespeople, we could get maybe a 10%, maybe a 15% increase. But now to see that we could actually get an increase that's 10 or more times what the sales were before the selection is enormous. And so it's fascinating and to me humbling to realize how much difference selection makes in the process. Another one of 195 telesales reps. In this case, we're looking at their sales per week. And again, look at this. We're going from an average of 5.2 to an average of 28.8. So here's the bottom 50. Here's the top 50. So imagine if you take and replace the bottom 50 with people who sell 28.8. You're going to have about 23 sales per week increase times the 50 people you just replaced. That's an enormous increase. That's 1,000 additional sales based on that one simple change. And so it's critical. In this particular case, we know that what this company needs is people who are better at building relationships and move a little faster through the process. If we put those people in, we get the kind of results that we're looking for. So our target pattern looks like this, and the results are dramatic. The last, or next to the last one here I've got is looking at a group here of, again, financial services industry. We're looking at 82 inbound sales reps. And again, it's almost a 10x increase between 335,000 and 3.1 million. Again, if we were to replace the bottom group, the bottom 20, with people who look like the top group, we can expect to see an increase of about 10x in that grouping. You know, that starts to be an enormous amount of money when you start to multiply it times those 20 people. And what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for people who are a little bit more assertive, who are a little bit more outgoing, who are a little bit faster and better, have a little bit more urgency in what they're doing. And that difference makes all the difference. We're not looking, this is not your, by the way, this pattern is not your classic go out and kill them kind of salesperson. As a matter of fact, this is kind of a mild, average, wouldn't recognize this person as a standout if you met them kind of person. But in the inbound sales, remember inbound leads are produced for them. They just have to answer the phone. In that environment, this kind of person flourishes. And by knowing that, we're able to predict that these are the people who are going to outperform others in this job. And so very quickly say to this organization, let's put the right people in the right role for you so you start to see these 10x improvements in performance. What we see when we're interviewing, and this tool really helps recruiters, is recruiters can very quickly look at two candidates, and let's say we're bringing, that we're bringing in a candidate that looks like the bottom grouping, and we know what our top ideal is. Our recruiter is able to compare, your recruiter, when they're trained in this, is able to compare these patterns and know what they have to interview into. They know the kinds of situations that this person is going to be hampered with. We know their weaknesses, and we can talk to them about those issues. We can see if there's any possibility of them being able to overcome that particular weakness. We run into this a lot because we'll have people who come in with below average patterns, but have a lot of experience that we might want in the organization. And so before we bring them in, let's see if they really can perform at the level that we need. And by focusing our interviewing on those areas that are a known weakness statistically, we're able to make an enormous difference in that interviewing cycle. As a matter of fact, most of these interviews happen over the telephone. We know what questions your people, because of this, know what questions to ask, and therefore they can get to the heart of the matter very quickly. That saves them an enormous amount of time in their process. You know, we typically find we can cut the interviewing time for you in half by using the assessments, because what you're going to do is weed out those people who are not a fit and quickly get to those people who are going to be winners. By quickly getting to those people who are going to be winners, you end up picking the right people fast before somebody else gets them. Remember, top people don't stay on the unemployment line long. They go out and find something. And so we need a process that not only ensures that we're getting the right people, but make sure that we're getting the best before they're gone. So important to do that. Make sure that you know what you're looking for. As a matter of fact, we have situations where when someone applies for a job, the patterns are screened immediately. And the part of the application process is to record their cell phone number. And if the person matches the behavioral style, the company calls them on their cell phone and says, we would like to book an appointment for you to come back and be interviewed. They do this before they ever look at the resume or anything else. If they've got the right behavioral style, they pull these people off the street and get them back in for an interview. They're not promising them a job. They're just making sure that they have a first chance opportunity to look at these high match people as quickly as possible. If they waited 2, 3, 4, 5 days to stack up some resumes and go through them, waiting for managers to finally get around to seeing what they've got, the cream of the crop will be gone, and you will have missed out. You're going to get the dregs from somebody else. The people today who are winning are using a process that is faster and more accurate than the process that others are using. You know, essentially what we're saying is, by understanding what drives and motivates a person, we will get much higher performance. So the selection moves us into this motivation piece. The same information that I've just talked to you about for the last half an hour, the same insight that you will gain on your candidates in the application process, we then hand off to your managers. So your manager now can look at these individuals and look at their patterns and understand it, and now understands exactly what to do to motivate that individual and get the best out of them. So we don't just look at this knowledge that we've gained at this process as being something that's important for just selection. It is critical that managers understand how to use this knowledge so they can manage their people more effectively, so they can treat each person like an individual, so they can figure out what it takes. It's kind of interesting. I was at one of our clients who's a large call center, and it was the last day of the month, and they were trying to get some sales. And the sales manager, who's an old-style sales manager, is standing on the floor with a big fan of $100 bills. And he's yelling out, I've got $100 for the next person who brings me a deal. Come on, I need a deal. And I looked at him and I said, remember, we looked at the profile of these people. These people are not money-driven. They're customer satisfaction-driven. And all you're doing is telling them that if they rip somebody off, you'll give them $100. That's what they hear in their mind, because they're not money-motivated people. They're relationship people. So let's flip that phrase around. And by better understanding his people, he started saying, I've got $100 for the next person who transfers me a new happy customer. And that made all the difference. All of a sudden, sales went up. Their people were thrilled to get the $100 because they got the $100 for the right reason. Now, does money motivate some salespeople? Absolutely. It motivates a lot of them. But understanding what motivates them, being able to know the people that you've brought into your organization, having brought in the right people and then being able to motivate them more effectively drives performance to levels you never could have any other way. So it's a wonderful process. It's a process we would be happy to demonstrate for you anytime. We'd be happy to run several of your people through the process and show them what we do, show you what we do, so you can see the kind of insight we would gain from them. So with that, I'm going to open up the lines and see if there are any questions and field those. So let me open up everybody's microphone. And so if you have, if you're not speaking and you've got some background noise, feel free to hit your own mute button. Let me ask, do we have any questions? Well, I don't hear any this morning, and that's just fine. If you have questions in the future, feel free to reach out to us or your predictive results consultant, and we'll be happy to answer those for you. We can be reached at predictiveresults.com. I'm Steve Waterhouse. I can be reached at steve@predictiveresults.com. And you can always reach us at our phone number 904-269-2299 in Orange Park, Florida. We're happy that you joined us today for the program and look forward to talking to you again soon. Again, please let us know if you have other questions or would like to have a demonstration of the product and our services. Again, thank you so much for joining us today.